Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm up at 5 a.m. to give you all the biggest Amazon Prime deals for GPU mining, CPU mining, general computer building. There's some crazy deals, so let's get into it. So I'm going to go through power supplies first. That's something that all miners need. This is a pretty good deal that I didn't even know that Amazon sold 750 watt server PSUs until recently, and I've actually bought and used these. They work totally fine. This is down to $37 for basically 1500 watts of power. Of course, you still need to buy breakout boards and power cables. I'll have parallel miner links down below, but those are overall relatively cheap still. This is a good deal if you need a lot of server PSU power. They also have some really good deal on ATX PSU. So if you guys have seen my rig builds, I normally use an ATX PSU and then server PSUs. The ATX PSU to turn on the motherboard and then link it to the server PSU so they all turn on with one switch. So this is pretty good right here, an 850 for $94. I mean, back in the day, you could always get an 850 PSU for under $100, but that's not the case anymore. We'll look at Honey real quick and see how much this has dropped. It looks like it was going for around 127 and it's down to 94. So decent if you need a relatively big PSU for maybe like a gaming rig or something. One of my all-time favorite PSUs of all time is the Aries Game 500 watt. This is what I use on almost all my rig builds because it's extremely cheap and I'm not powering any GPUs with it. I'm just using it to turn the rig on. $35 for a 500 watt PSU with a 5-year warranty. That is hard to beat. It's down 30% today. I might get another one of these just for a future rig build because I always keep a couple of these on hand. Never had one go bad. I don't know if Aries Game is a reputable brand or not, but I have been using them for a couple years now and zero issues. Another cheap PSU. So if you don't want to go with the Aries Game and you trust EVGA more, well, this is a 700 watt PSU bronze for 60 bucks. So that's pretty good as well. Let's see what the price drop was on this thing. It was 72 down to 60. So pretty decent little drop if you want maybe a little bit bigger PSU from a reliable brand. All right. This one is interesting. So if you guys are trying to penny pinch or get the cheapest rig possible at all, I wouldn't buy this deal. But I know there's a lot of people who just have too much money and they love just buying the GPUs for rigs off Amazon because it's easy. You can return them if you need to. So if you want to build a rig and you don't necessarily care how cheap you get the prices for, this is a pretty good deal for 3070s. It's maybe $60 more than you would get on eBay, but you don't have to deal with people on eBay. So that's depending on what that's worth to you. This could be a good option. There's only 5 left, so this probably isn't a great one, but some people might like it. The next up is Tangem. So I wanted to highlight here that the Tangem, and this is actually a pack of 3. Let's look at the pack of 2. The Tangem on Amazon is $43, which even if you use my 10% referral code on tangem.com, it's actually cheaper to get them on Amazon. So if you don't know what a Tangem is, it's basically my favorite cold wallet to store your Bitcoin, your Caspa. It's getting a lithium soon. It already has Radiant. It's got basically the most mineable coins out of any cold wallet, and it's extremely easy to use. They have a great ecosystem, a great app, and they're always adding new coins. So as far as a hardware wallet, this is the first one I ever got, and it's probably the last one I'll ever get because it just works amazing. So this is actually a good deal, better than you can get even with my 10% off code. So check this one out. Next category is going to be storage. So I know like Chia mining I don't think is a big thing anymore, but still there's some crazy storage deals. So this is an 8 terabyte hard drive. I don't know what you would use a hard drive for unless you just have like a ton of pictures and stuff you want to store. But 8 terabytes for $150, that's pretty crazy. Check that out if you need just a ton of storage. And it looks like these things can even go up to 18 terabyte. I'm curious to see what that is. 500 bucks. What about 16? Or you can get 16 terabytes for $290. So those are some crazy storage deals. I'm curious back in the Chia days if this would have been a crazy deal or not. I never really got into that. All right, next up in storage is this 4 terabyte NVMe drive. So this is down to 260 from 700. This is likely they just bumped the list price up to make it look like it was a bigger discount. But regardless, this is a pretty good deal until I saw that this 1 terabyte drive is only 48 bucks. So if you do the math, you're actually better off getting 4 of these. Obviously, you have to plug 4 of them in. That's kind of a headache. And the speeds on this one are actually faster as well. 7,300 versus, I believe this one was 6. So this is a pretty good deal if you care about fast speeds. 4 terabyte for 260 is definitely a pretty reputable deal. I'm debating on getting one of these just because I do so much editing and I've got a ton of video files. This is something to think about. It's Western Digital, so it's a great memory brand. I briefly mentioned this one as well, but if you do need just an extra terabyte, then this is a pretty sweet deal. $50 down from 62. $50 for a 1 terabyte SSD. If you're still running your computer on a hard drive, this is an absolute must-have. It makes your computer so much faster. So if you're on a hard drive, get this. I promise it will be worth it. Moving on, let's get into CPUs. So I've been wanting to make some CPU mining rigs for a while. I just haven't made the jump because when I do the math on motherboard cost versus CPU cost versus RAM cost, it ends up being relatively expensive for not that great of an ROI. But they do have some crazy CPU deals here. So this is the 5800X for $121, down from $450. That's pretty interesting. If you already have an AM4 motherboard, this could be a pretty cheap upgrade. They also have the 5900X, which is a great CPU miner, and for $220 down from $570. These list prices are pretty inflated. It definitely was not that high. Let's quickly see what this was beforehand. Yeah, so $233 down to $220. So they're basically inflating the list price to make it look like it's a better deal. But still, $220 for 5900X is worth considering if you're getting into CPU mining, but I'd try to look for these used where you can get them under 200 sometimes. All right, up next is a 7900X. This is also a very, very good mining CPU for $322. I just bought a 7800X 3D this year for like $450, so this is definitely I wish I would have just waited for this deal because I do much more editing and workstation stuff as opposed to gaming, and this would have been a lot better, especially when I turn this back on to mine during the winter. So that's a pretty good deal. Let's check the history on this. Did they inflate the list price as well? My guess is they did. And yeah, it looks like $319 to $322, so it actually went up $3 from the last couple days. But overall, this is still a good CPU, and Amazon would be a good place to buy it. Let's talk about motherboards. So this is a relatively good X670. I'm curious if they have any cheap AM4 motherboards. So AM4 motherboards would be good for CPU miners. It looks like this Asus one is down to $80. That's pretty good. And this ASRock one is down to $60. So I'm gonna pull this one up. If you need a cheap motherboard for CPU mining, this is probably a good option. You guys let me know. I'm definitely not an expert on CPU mining motherboards, but I believe this would work fine because you don't care how many PCIe slots there are, and you can fit your 32 gigs of RAM in there. So that is a decent option as well. Now let's talk about miscellaneous items. So there's a few miscellaneous GPU mining items that I use, and a couple of them are on pretty good deals right now. This just saved $2 on a fan splitter. So this is, you power your fans with a PCIe header, and it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 fan headers, and it's also got this blue knob to adjust the fan speed, which is actually very nice, especially if your fans are very loud at high speed. So this decent deal. It's already cheap as hell, so something to think about there. This screen printing stuff is hilarious. This is the material I use as my filtration because you get a ton of it, basically 3 yards for $8, and I only used half of this to filter all of my garage intake windows. So overall, very good screen material for mining. And I don't even really know what it's for, making t-shirts, I think. But $8 for a lot of filter material is definitely going to save you. Instead of buying like Honeywell HVAC filters, you're going to break the bank if you try to buy those. Next up is a Leviton 30 amp 240 volt outlet for $13 instead of 33. I'm probably going to pick one of these up because I'm maybe going to add another 240 volt circuit. I already have the PDU and I would just need to buy a thing of Romex. And when I can get the outlet for $13, I'm probably just actually going to buy that. So I just have it whenever I want to make that jump because it's likely not going to be cheaper than that. And lastly, this is more important in the summer, but still always super interesting to have, is these Govee sensor packs. I use these to monitor the temperature of my exhaust, my intake, and the ambient temperature outside, and I can evaluate how well my little GPU mining enclosure is actually working. These are down to $55 from $80, so a pretty decent deal. But other than that, that's all the Amazon deals that I saw right off the bat. If you guys see any good ones, definitely let everyone else know in the comments. We're all trying to get great, cheap parts on Amazon Prime Day. So I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching Modern Mining.